He's lying in bed. It's the middle of Freshers Week. Supposedly the most exciting time, to be a new student, but just in his room, scrolling through his phone.
Right.
And his feed is basically this highlight reel from a life he isn't living.
Yeah.
He sees post after post on Instagram, Snapchat, flashing lights from clubs he didn't go to, new friends laughing over drinks, groups of people already looking like they've known each other for years.
Yeah, the instant best friends vibe.
Exactly. And this was the exact life he'd seen online that convinced him to quit his job and apply to university in the first place.
Wow. So he really bought into that image.
He did. He had done his research, picked a uni famous for its student life, all to avoid that feeling of missing out, FOMO, right?
Yeah.
But as he lies there, alone, with his roommates just quietly staying in, he describes it as the loneliest week of his entire life.
Oof. During Freshers Week, that's tough.
Yeah. And he starts to feel his confidence just drain away, wondering, maybe they just don't like me.
Oh, that's brutal, that internal spiral.
Totally. He eventually posted a short video on TikTok about that feeling, just, putting it out there.
Okay.
And the comment section just exploded. It turns out that gap between the neon-drenched fantasy on his phone and the quiet reality of his room wasn't just his problem.
No.
It was almost everyone's.
And that feeling, that immediate, profound sense of isolation and, frankly, failure, that's the core of our deep dive today.
Right.
We are investigating this expectation gap.
Right.
And look, this isn't just a minor disappointment. It's this widening chasm between the highly idealized expectations of university life, often, fueled by that social media highlight reel, and the challenging, complex reality of actually transitioning into the first year of UK higher education.
So we're really examining the architecture of student survival here, connecting the dots between those maybe impossibly high student expectations, the often misaligned expectations from academic staff.
Yeah, the teaching side.
The resulting, acute social isolation, and then ultimately whether a student actually makes it through, whether they complete their degree.
Exactly. This is fundamental to student retention, their well-being, their academic success across the whole UK sector. It's not a fringe issue.
No, it sounds critical.
The stakes are immense, particularly because this transition to university often coincides with a really critical developmental period, The brain is highly sensitive to stress then, and for many, it's the first time away from home, away from their established family and social structures.
Right, everything's new.
Everything. And failure to manage this emotional, social, and academic transition, well, it results in poor performance and higher dropout rates. It's a system-wide vulnerability we need to understand.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting exactly where that opening story began, with the digital catalyst, the pervasive influence of social media, it seems to act as both a source of relief and, maybe more powerfully, a distortion field for this whole transition experience.
Yeah, what's immediately clear, I think, from the research is that we can't just paint social media as the simple villain here. It has this incredible dual nature.
Absolutely.
Students identify it as both, a source of relief and a major stressor. Maybe let's start with the positive side, the things that actually seem to decrease student anxiety.
It's vital we acknowledge those positives first. Yeah. The primary benefit that comes up again and again is social connectivity.
Makes sense.
Especially for students who've moved a long way. Think about non-EU or international students. For them, social media is a lifeline. It lets them keep up long-distance relationships, it bridges geographical gaps, and it lets them build these web-based communities, finding people with similar interests online when maybe they haven't found them on campus yet. Yeah, especially during isolation periods like we saw with the pandemic, that must have been crucial.
Essential. It satisfies that fundamental human drive we all have to seek and maintain social commitments. It provides a sort of stable external reference point when everything else feels really unstable.
And there's another side to the relief, isn't there? The sort of cognitive rest. Students talk about using social media for escapism.
Right, as a coping mechanism. A distraction or just, a source of relief from immediate academic anxiety or other problems.
Yeah, they literally call it mindless entertainment, or a nice break after maybe a tough study session. Just lets them pull their minds into a different, lower stakes reality for a bit.
And we shouldn't discount the sort of immediate hit of positive validation either.
The likes.
Yeah, the likes, the comments. Receiving compliments or even just simple likes provides a quick, positive emotional lift. Students do note the positive impact of these web-based exchanges. It confirms their sense of self-worth, belonging, even if it's fleeting.
A brief rush of affirmation.
apps.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which can temporarily counteract those feelings of loneliness.
Okay, but that temporary rush,
Yeah.
it really seems to come with an exorbitant long-term cost.
Yeah.
Because the anxiety spikes caused by the negative channels, they seem massive.
They are.
And here's where it gets really interesting, right? The single greatest anxiety multiplier cited by, 22 students in one study is comparison.
That is the absolute core driver of distress here. And it's insidious because it's constant. It's always on.
Right.
And we see two distinct forms of this upward comparison emerging. First, there's the comparison of life.
Okay.
Students look at social media and they compare their own often kind of struggling, nascent social lives, their academic achievements, perceived wealth, status, all of it. And this leads to profound anxiety about not doing enough or not succeeding fast enough.
And it's not just simple jealousy, is it? The sources mention different types of competition.
That's right. They break it down. You see both integrative competition,
which is
where a student might genuinely be happy for a peer's success, but feel kind of hostile about their own perceived lack of achievement. So it's directed inwards.
Okay, self-blame almost.
Yeah. And then you have aggressive competition, which is more directly resentful towards the other person.
Right.
So the brain is trying to process these two conflicting narratives, validating someone else's success while simultaneously punishing yourself for not being at the same level. It's exhausting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this constant performance pressure must be particularly acute on the image-based platforms, like Instagram.
Oh, definitely. Comparison of body image to perceived ideals or influencers is rampant.
Yeah.
And it leads directly to insecurity, anxiety. This is why students mention things like deleting posts that didn't get enough likes.
Wow.
If their digital self-presentation isn't validated immediately, they feel less valued or appreciated in real life. The fear of judgment, the pressure to perform this kind of ideal self, it's pervasive and really tiring.
And comparison feeds directly into that monster we mentioned earlier, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
FOMO. If our student in the opening story hadn't checked his phone, maybe he would have just been bored in his room, but he wouldn't have felt like a failure.
Exactly. FOMO creates this chronic, unnecessary stress. It's driven by the feeling that you're constantly missing out on highly rewarding experiences that you see flashing across your peers' feeds.
And that stress is chronic, you said, like always on background noise.
Pretty much. Students reported that even being away from their phone for just a couple of hours could trigger acute anxiety.
Just 2 hours.
Yeah. Anxiety about missing crucial messages or events or inside jokes. It emphasizes that the underlying anxiety isn't necessarily about the event itself. It's about the relentless, persistent connection and this constant fear that being disconnected equals social failure or exclusion.
Wow. Okay, so beyond the anxiety from the content, the sheer existence of social media, the connectivity itself creates stress.
Yes, we're talking about excessive connectivity leading to chronic background stress. Students feel overwhelmed just managing the constant notifications, feeling obliged to respond really quickly.
Right, that pressure to be always on.
Yeah, it keeps their nervous system basically on high alert all the time.
And does that constant contact also make them overthink things?
Massively. It forces students to overanalyze interactions that, in person might just be fleeting. They scrutinize web-based exchanges. Seeing someone is online but hasn't messaged back, that leads to self-consciousness, anxiety.
What I do wrong?
Exactly. They question relationships. Did I say something wrong? Or why doesn't this person have time for me? This self-presentation anxiety turns even casual connections into these deeply taxing psychological endeavors.
And finally, I guess there are the outright negative experiences too.
Unfortunately, yes. Things like cyberbullying or exposure to genuinely distressing and harmful content, like the glamorization of self-harm, for example.
Right.
In those moments, the internet isn't just preventing an escape, it's actively becoming a new source of emotional threat. And that can obviously exacerbate any pre-existing mental health challenges someone might have.
So just to kind of wrap up this section, the phone isn't just a distraction from anxiety. Often it's the generator of the anxiety.
That's a good way to put it.
The moment a student steps into university, they're armed with this device that seems to constantly validate their deepest anxieties, reinforcing the idea that they are socially or academically failing, sometimes before they've even really started.
Yeah, before they've had a chance to find their feet. It's a tough setup.
And that digital validation, or more often, the lack of it, it crashes hard against the physical reality of isolation, doesn't it? Loneliness isn't some sort of soft issue here. It seems like a full-blown crisis across the UK student body.
It really is. And we have the data to quantify this social deficiency. It's stark. Over 15% of students report feeling lonely daily.
Daily?
And an additional 32.7% feel lonely weekly.
Okay, so add that up. That's nearly half the student population struggling with acute loneliness on a regular basis.
Nearly half. And these statistics, they reveal what looks like a broken social safety net. Only 77% of students feel they have people they can reliably call on for help.
Only 77. That still leaves nearly a quarter who don't feel that basic level of support.
Exactly. And perhaps the most deeply worrying statistic, for me anyway, is that 17% report having no true friends at all at university.
17%. No true friends.
None. That's 1 in 6 students who have failed to make even a basic, meaningful connection, potentially months into their university experience.
That's staggering. And you mentioned a structural problem underpinning that 17%. Something about time spent alone.
Yes. The sources indicate students often spend, on average, 4.2 hours a day alone in their rooms.
4.2 hours alone. Every day.
Yeah, think about that. That's nearly a quarter of their waking day spent physically isolated.
Okay, put that together with the social media stuff. If you spend over 4 hours a day alone, scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, watching this constant stream of curated perfect moments from your peers.
Which completely contradicts your own reality.
Right. The feeling of failure must just amplify exponentially. The quiet of the room meets the kind of noise of the highlight reel.
Exactly. That 4.2 hours isn't just a measure of time. It's a measure of psychological vulnerability. It's prime time for anxieties to spiral without any intervention, without any counter-narrative from a real-life peer.
And this loneliness epidemic, it doesn't hit everyone equally, does it? It impacts vulnerable groups much harder.
Significantly harder, and that means support needs to be even more targeted.
Like who, specifically?
Well, disabled students, for example, they report feeling lonely daily at a rate of 28.5%. That's nearly double the general student rate.
Double. Wow.
And for international students, that lack of a safety net can feel extremely precarious. Non-EU students are less likely to agree. They have people to call on for company. Only about 66% agree.
Okay.
And international students overall are more likely to report having no true friends, 20%, compared to about 16.6% overall.
Why is that gap so pronounced for these groups, do you think? What are the barriers?
Well, for international students, you've got logistical barriers, cultural ones, sometimes linguistic ones. They're far from home, navigating a completely new system, maybe struggling with language nuances or just different social customs.
Yeah, that's a lot to juggle.
It is. And for disabled students, social inclusion might be structurally limited, perhaps by physical accessibility issues or maybe the stigma sometimes attached to disclosure. It just makes actively seeking out social engagement more taxing and potentially less rewarding if the environment isn't accommodating.
Okay, so this loneliness, it's clearly devastating emotionally. But it moves way beyond just well-being, doesn't it? It's critical to university retention.
Absolutely critical.
And this is where that anecdote you mentioned earlier comes in about Christina. Her grades were actually fine.
Yeah, academically she was doing okay.
But she dropped out, citing that generic reason, oh, it just wasn't for me. But the real driver was loneliness.
That anecdote illustrates the retention connection perfectly. Loneliness convinces students they don't belong. It just eats away at them. And this emotional distress often manifests as academic disengagement, stress, anxiety. When a student feels profoundly lonely, their emotional resources are just depleted. It makes it almost impossible to focus on the demands of independent study.
So they leave. And they say it's general dissatisfaction or the course wasn't right.
When the root cause was actually the collapse of their social system or the failure to build one in the first place.
And the numbers back this up, right? Mental health, including stress and anxiety, is a top 3 concern for almost half of all students.
45.5%.
Yeah.
Nearly half cite it as a major worry, and the link to loneliness is direct. 41.3% of those students who report having no true friends also feel lonely daily.
Wow.
If you don't feel integrated socially, you are significantly more likely to leave, regardless of how smart you are, regardless of your A-level grades.
So the ability to form even just a small friend group acts as a kind of academic protective factor.
You could definitely see it that way, yes. Yeah. And if the problem is social isolation, the proven antidote is involvement, getting stuck in.
And the data on activities seems really compelling here. Getting involved in extracurricular stuff, societies, sports, even just attending evening events, it's strongly associated with better well-being, higher happiness scores.
And crucially, it dramatically reduces the number of students reporting no true friends.
How dramatically?
Look at the sheer impact. For students who attend night events, maybe club nights, society socials, things like that, the rate of having no true friends drops from that overall 16.6% average down to just 4.7%.
4.7. That's a huge drop.
It's massive. Activities create that essential sense of belonging and community. They force, in a good way, repeated, low-stakes, positive interactions. They transform the student from being just this isolated individual into a participant in a shared identity, a shared activity.
Okay, so we've established this pretty crushing combination of digital performance anxiety and real-world physical isolation. But this transition shock, it seems to have a third equally impactful component.
Yeah.
The academic environment itself.
Yeah.
There's a significant mismatch between what students expect and what lecturers expect from the learning process, this sort of school hangover you mentioned.
Exactly, the school hangover. It stems from this assumption of continuity. Students arrive expecting their previous educational model, which is fundamentally teacher-focused, chalk and talk, maybe to just continue.
Right.
Less than half of students actually expected university teaching to be fundamentally different from school or college.
Less than half, really?
Yeah. They anticipated more of what's called the information transmitting teacher-focused style, or ITTF.
Okay, what does that look like?
That's where the lecturer dictates notes, provides very structured materials, and basically holds the primary responsibility for ensuring the information is absorbed, like pouring knowledge into an empty vessel.
Gotcha. And crucially, this expectation extends beyond just teaching style into the sort of emotional sphere, too.
It does. Many expected staff to be far more sympathetic, friendly, helpful, almost pastoral in a way. Some students genuinely believed that lecturers held the primary responsibility for student learning, which suggests, a fundamental failure to grasp the autonomy, the responsibility, the critical thinking required at the higher education level.
There's a big gap. And you see this playing out in how they estimate the workload, too.
Absolutely. There's a workload miscalculation. Now, to be fair, a high percentage of students, about 60%, did expect to struggle with the workload and 50% with the pace. So they knew it would be harder.
Okay.
But they still consistently underestimated the massive volume of hours required for self-directed study, for independent learning, reading, research, prep.
Because if they believe the lecturer holds the primary responsibility,
then they aren't budgeting the necessary personal time, the mental energy to actually meet the demands of HE. They're waiting to be told exactly what to do, perhaps.
Okay, now let's flip the lens. Let's look at the lecturer reality. How do academic staff actually view their role in UK higher education?
Well, the general academic preference, especially beyond the first year, is for what's called the Conceptual Change Student-Focused Approach, or CCSF.
CCSF. Okay, break that down.
Their philosophy emphasizes that students are primarily responsible for their own learning. It's about engaging in critical evaluation, doing your own research, independent study. The goal isn't rote memorization.
Right.
It's motivating students to develop genuine interest, to challenge existing knowledge, to apply concepts in new ways.
So it's the difference between, I guess, being spoon-fed information and being handed the tools, like a fishing rod, to find it yourself.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Can I give you a concrete example?
Please.
Okay, so in the high school ITTF model, the teacher might ask, what are the stages of photosynthesis? And the student gives a memorized answer.
Yep.
In the university CCSF model, the instructor might ask something like, okay, how would you adapt the known process of photosynthesis to develop sustainable food sources for a potential Mars colony?
Whoa. Okay, yeah, different level.
Completely different cognitive load. The student is forced to critically evaluate the core concepts, integrate totally new environmental variables, propose a novel solution. It's about thinking, not just recalling.
Okay, so that philosophical stance, CCSF, is clearly miles away from what many first-year students are expecting, especially the younger ones, under 20, you said.
Yes, particularly those coming straight from school.
But the research suggests lecturers aren't totally unaware of this gap. They do try to adapt their teaching style, especially early on.
They do, quite strategically, it seems. Lecturers tend to be more ITTF, more teacher-focused in the first year. They try to ease the transition. Maybe they give more structured notes or clearer assessment criteria initially.
Kind of bridging the gap.
Trying to, but they strategically and intentionally shift towards the more demanding CCSF student-focused style in later years. That's to promote genuine critical thinking and prepare students for postgraduate study or complex careers.
But is the communication clear about why that shift is happening? Do students understand the change?
Often, maybe not explicitly enough, the why behind the changing style might be missing, leaving students feeling a bit adrift when the scaffolding is gradually removed.
Right, and the gap isn't just about teaching style either. There was something in the data about less experienced lecturers.
Yeah, that was fascinating. It seems less experienced lecturers tend to hold more negative expectations of student engagement compared to their more veteran colleagues.
Why would that be?
Well, perhaps newer lecturers, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by the demands of the sector themselves, might lack the confidence or the established toolkit for successfully navigating that tricky first-year transition, so they might more quickly label student disengagement as apathy rather than seeing it as, transition shock or confusion.
And that negativity, even if unintentional, could just widen the gap further.
It could certainly exacerbate the distance between student and staff, yeah,
Right.
making students less likely to reach out.
So the consequence of this sort of dual mismatch, the social failure combined with the academic shock, sounds profound.
It is. Students feel uncertain about their roles, their responsibilities in this new CCSF environment. They might falsely believe, for example, oh, I can skip lectures if the notes are online. Or they might feel abandoned by the kind of support structure they relied on back in school.
And that uncertainty directly impacts learning.
Absolutely. It impairs effective pedagogy, it decreases overall student satisfaction, and it contributes directly to poor academic performance and, yes, increased dropout rates. Those initial weeks of the first year are statistically the most dangerous time for withdrawal.
So managing these conflicting expectations, clarifying that independent learning mandate right from the start, it's vital.
Absolutely vital for setting students up for success.
Okay, so we've established the emotional vulnerabilities, the social isolation, the academic expectation shock. We know, theoretically, the antidote to loneliness is social integration, getting involved.
Right.
But we need to look at the practicalities now. What actually, physically, financially, or culturally, stops students from making those crucial connections? The connections we know improve well-being and retention.
Yeah, the reality on the ground. The sources highlight several major structural barriers. First up, logistics.
Not logistics, like getting around.
Yeah. Commuting, for instance, is a big one. It takes time, energy. If you're living off campus, getting involved is just harder. And linked to that, late class times, particularly lectures scheduled between 3 and 5 p.m., were flagged as major hurdles.
Why the late lecture specifically?
Because they clash directly with the prime time for extracurricular activities, society meetings, sports training. They basically cut out the golden hours for group interaction for commuters or students with part-time jobs in the evening. It contributes to acute isolation for those groups.
Okay, but maybe the deepest challenge, the one that affects almost everyone, is financial strain.
Huge issue with, 70% of students expecting to work alongside their studies?
70%.
Yeah, and 45% actually experiencing financial hardship. The need to earn money drastically reduces the time available for leisure, for just hanging out, sometimes even for attending all their classes.
So that need to work creates a horrible dilemma, doesn't it?
It really does. If a student is working, say, 20 hours a week just to make ends meet, they're juggling that job, demanding CCSF coursework, maybe a long commute.
Their bandwidth for socializing must be practically zero.
Exactly. Their available mental and physical energy for joining a society or going to a casual event is minimal. They're forced to maximize their work and study output and minimize social investment, which ironically just exacerbates stress and diminishes the chance to build that vital social capital.
So if the solution we're heading towards involves more low-stakes socializing, we have to ask, is it even realistic to expect time-poor students working long hours to prioritize that over sleep or study or just collapsing?
That's a fundamental challenge for institutions, absolutely.
Yeah.
The financial strain barrier doesn't mean low-stakes connection isn't needed. It just means those opportunities have to be incredibly efficient, accessible, and maybe integrated differently.
And the problem is also cultural, you mentioned.
Yes. Many activities, especially during that crucial Freshers Week period, are heavily centered around alcohol. Pub crawls, club nights.
Which immediately excludes quite a few people.
Right. Non-drinkers, students with certain faith restrictions, they can feel instantly marginalized if that's the main offering.
And there's a confidence issue, too. Feeling inadequate.
Definitely. Social anxiety gets compounded by feelings of inadequacy. We heard from students, maybe from state school backgrounds, who felt they lacked the ability or confidence to join, say, prestigious sports clubs or music societies.
Right.
They believed, rightly or wrongly, that other students, perhaps from more privileged backgrounds, had received years of expensive training or coaching, giving them an unfair advantage. They felt the environment wasn't really designed for them, or that they wouldn't fit in.
That's tough. And we can't overlook the accommodation situation either. You mentioned conflict with flatmates.
Yes, not getting along with flatmates was cited as a critical, acute factor driving loneliness. For a new student, especially someone away from home for the first time, if their actual living space, their home base, feels toxic or isolating.
There's no escape, no psychological safe harbor.
Precisely. Yet when students in that situation seek help, maybe try to transfer rooms, they often report feeling unsupported by accommodation services. Transfer requests get stuck on long waiting lists, leaving them trapped in a difficult situation.
Okay, so those are some formidable barriers.
Yeah.
Given all of that, if the students themselves are the experts on what they actually need, what proactive interventions do they suggest? How do they think we can bridge this divide?
Well, the overarching student-led request is for a strategic shift towards more casual, consistent socializing.
Casual and consistent. Okay.
Students want universities to move away, perhaps, from relying solely on high-commitment societies that require lots of time, or formal, expensive events that are just hard to attend if you're working or commuting.
So what do they want instead?
They explicitly ask for more non-drinking options, more daytime events, and more low-pressure social opportunities. Things like, coffee mornings, board game sessions in the common room, maybe course-specific gatherings that are inherently low stakes, stuff that's easy to just drop into without needing huge amounts of pre-existing confidence or financial commitment.
Makes sense. Easy entry points.
Exactly. They also recognize the power of structure within their actual studies. They advocate for better academic integration, meaning course instructors need to actively encourage, maybe even require graded group work, small discussion groups within large lectures, collaborative projects, things that break the inherent isolation of just sitting in a huge lecture theater.
So using the course itself to build connections.
Yes, fostering organic peer support, which is also essential for navigating that CCSF learning style we talked about, helping each other understand complex ideas.
And crucially, they stress the need for more proactive staff support, that human touch.
Big emphasis on this. They believe personal tutors, residential advisors, RAs, in halls, need to be much more proactive, building rapport, checking in casually, not just waiting for a student to hit crisis point before intervening.
So not just having an open door, but actively walking through it sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. One student noted that RAs shouldn't just be reactive. They should maybe just drop by rooms every couple of weeks, even for 5 minutes, just to say hi, establish trust. That simple act lowers the immense barrier for a student who is struggling but feels unable to self-identify as being in crisis.
It creates a psychologically safer environment to ask for help.
Precisely. And regarding the formal mental health services, the message was really clear about accessibility and continuity of care.
The long waiting lists are notorious, right?
They are. Students feel like, just a number on a waiting list, which obviously increases their distress when they're already vulnerable. They demand increased accessibility, shorter wait times.
Makes sense.
And critically, better continuity of care, especially for students relocating with pre-existing mental health needs. If they've moved cities, their established care network is gone. They need support bridging that gap.
Was there anything else on the support front?
Yeah, they also requested maybe a transition-specific virtual help offer, something anonymous, perhaps like Childline, for students who feel too anxious or overwhelmed to even leave their rooms to seek face-to-face support initially.
Interesting idea. Finally, there was a really strong call about university marketing, wasn't there? A plea for honesty.
Yes. The psychological impact of unrealistic marketing, it seems, cannot be overstated. Students feel universities need to seriously reconsider marketing materials that over-romanticize the experience with phrases like the best years of your life.
Because it sets them up for a fall.
Exactly. That unrealistic expectation just compounds the disappointment and self-blame when the reality turns out to be challenging, maybe quiet, filled with hard, independent study. The student blames themselves for somehow failing to achieve the advertised best years.
So what's the alternative?
Providing a clear, realistic picture of university life before they arrive. Being upfront about the academic demands, the number of hours needed for independent study, maybe even acknowledging that, yes, a significant minority of students do feel lonely initially. Managing expectations is actually a form of proactive support. Sensitive communication.
Yeah.
Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, so we have completed our deep dive into the UK university transition. And the picture that emerges, it's one of, well, a significant structural vulnerability, wouldn't you say?
I think that's fair. Students are facing this crushing combination of social media pressure, a really jarring academic expectation shock, and this acute loneliness epidemic that's fueled by financial, logistical, and sometimes cultural barriers.
Yeah.
And the core lesson, I think, that we take away from all this is one of joint responsibility. This isn't an issue that can be solved just by, bolting on a few more counseling services.
And it's deeper than that.
Much deeper. Universities need to move towards actively creating psychologically safe environments. And that means focusing intensely on the human element of the transition. Well, when we work to reduce the social stigma around loneliness, when we proactively staff peer-to-peer support systems, mentors, buddies, and when we ensure that staff, tutors, RAs are visible, approachable, and actively building rapport from day one, that's when we start addressing the root causes of early distress and potential dropout.
And combining that with clear communication about expectations.
Absolutely. If we can successfully communicate clear, realistic expectations about the workload, about the nature of CCSF independent learning, while simultaneously ensuring that every student has an easy, accessible path to form those low-stakes social bonds, then we can genuinely transform the student experience.
So ultimately, success in university might hinge less on a student's A-level grades on arrival.
Important as those are.
And far more on whether we, as institutions, provide them with the social and emotional resources they need to feel like they actually belong.
Precisely. When students feel integrated, when they feel seen and supported, that vulnerable first year is transformed. It stops being just a test of endurance and becomes a genuine, sustainable foundation for learning, for growth, and hopefully for a positive university journey.